The year is 2016. Hamilton had just become a sensation on Broadway. Harambe died, may he rest in peace, and Pokemon Go came out to bring the world out of their houses for like 5 minutes. This was also the last time I played the standard format in Magic the Gathering. Sets like Oath of the Gatewatch and Shadows over Innistrad had just released during the time I started to play, and I fondly remember these sets because they had a lot of really cool cards and concepts. Some of the Eldrazi had just come out at that point, with cards like Thing in the Ice and Kozilek the Great Distortion getting their first debut prints in Magic's TCG. The standard format was really fun, and I think for a while after Shadows over Innistrad, I just kind of drifted away from it. I was still playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And it had kind of hit a higher point in the game before tampering off as well, and I just sort of drifted out of it, as well as the friends that I was playing with. Move forward at 7 years now, and I have decided to get back in to the standard format in Magic. For those of you who don't know, I have been taking a hiatus from actually playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, though I still follow the game and make updates, but I've been playing Magic's Commander format as well since 2021. Commander is a really fun format with a lot of crazy interaction and a huge card pool, which is part of the appeal for me, but I do miss playing competitively in tournaments for card games in general, and unfortunately Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just not hitting the mark for me right now, so I decided along with a couple of friends to check out Standard. Now, Magic Standard has gone through periods of ups and downs. Players have criticized it. It's gotten less of a following as formats like Pioneer have come out, giving more expansive but less expensive than modern options for people. But one of Magic's biggest things, in my opinion, of course, has always been the, multitude of formats that you can choose from. And I think Standard's kind of neat because the set rotation actually forces you to play cards that might otherwise not be used in other formats. So that brings me to today. I am going to start covering Standard Magic on the channel, but not necessarily in a way that I'm looking to act like I'm a pro by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to be taking you guys in videos through my initial thoughts in Standard as I learn the format, play with the different decks that are relevant, and just kind of talk about it as a whole, because when I started getting into this as of about a month ago, I had a little bit of trouble kind of finding that, Standard for beginners sort of thing that kind of just takes you through everything. And a few friends and I were talking, and I was like, what are some, different types of content that I can do? And I thought this might be one of them. So join me as we embark on a quest to play Standard Magic in 2023 and see how it goes. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the way Magic the Gathering works, Standard format typically spans about 2 years worth of sets. It uses a rotation much like Pokemon trading card game, and a lot of other trading card games do too, basically saying that as new sets come out, previous sets rotate, and usually this happens every September. Currently in Magic the Gathering, the following sets are legal. There's Innistrad Midnight Hunt, which was released in 2021, followed by Innistrad Crimson Vow. These were followed up by Kamigawa Neon Dynasty and Streets of New Capenna in early 2022, and then Dominaria United and Brothers War came out in mid to end of 2022. We started out the year 2023 with Phyrexia All Will Be One, arguably one of Magic's best sets in some time, and these 7 sets make up the current Standard format. In about a month, March of the Machines will be releasing, which will give us a total of 8 sets active in the format, prior to the upcoming September rotation. Since there's still 6 months left in Standard, I've been learning a lot of the decks, even though there are cards that will obviously be rotating out. And for the sake of these upcoming videos, we're going to be including cards from all of these, but I just thought it was worth mentioning that when the rotation happens, if it follows suit the way it has in the past, everything from Midnight Hunt to New Capenna will be cut from the format, and we'll have a different size pool of sets to look at that point. Of course, those formats will still be playable in other formats like Pioneer and Modern and so forth, but Standard will look very different. Now, as March of the Machine comes out, it's sort of bringing an Avengers Endgame style to Magic's current ongoing storyline, which admittedly I am not super caught up on the lore, but I am pretty caught up on the card pool, and I'm looking forward to seeing what March of the Machines brings to the table. We're going to look at the Tier 1 decks for Magic, just to kind of set the scene for it, as I have been actually trying to playtest with all of these decks, and certainly have not gotten far enough where I feel like an expert on them, but I've been playing Standard with some friends, and we're kind of getting into the whole gist of it, so let's take a look at the Tier 1 decks here in Standard currently. The first up is GRIXIS Midrange. This is a multicolor deck, black, blue, red, that's basically very combo-oriented. It's a control-style deck, utilizing cards like Bloodtithe Harvester and Corpse Appraiser, among with a lot of low-cost black spells that allow you to remove problems, and of course cards like Shoulder of the Apocalypse, which is just a very big standard card that is just extremely frustrating to play around at times, but also extremely useful when you have it. This is pretty much the best deck in the game, and some of the statistics that I was able to find going into this, it makes up about 13% of the meta share, giving it the highest tier representation. Next up, we've got Mono White Midrange, which is the deck I've actually been labbing and playing with the most, both in person and on MTG Arena. I almost got to Mythic with it, but unfortunately I was not able to get there because of the timing, and there's only 3 days left in the season at the time I'm recording this, but it's definitely my favorite of the decks so far. Like the name suggests, it's mono white, utilizing only white, but white does play a lot of enchantments that allow you to remove problematic cards for lower costs. Things like Ossification and Lay Down Arms seem to be the strongest things I've been able to find so far, and combining it with some pretty powerful planeswalkers like the Wandering Emperor and some enchantments like Wedding Announcement, you can essentially control the opponent for low cost and be able to have responses for everything. Mono White Midrange actually makes up about 8.99% of the meta share, putting it as the second ranked deck based on tournament results, so while it falls below the GRIXIS Midrange, it is still pretty good and does see a lot of representation. Magic Arena's standard format is very similar to, if not identical to, the in real life standard format, and I've seen the mono black GRIXIS midrange variants quite a lot, but second to that I think would be mono white, at least based on what I've played through. Third up, we have Mono Red Winds. That name I did not make up, that's just what they're calling it, and this deck of course is mono red, and it is very much focused on playing low cost cards with haste that can finish the opponent quickly in typical red fashion. Cards like Monastery Swiftspear being legal in Magic's standard format again, along with things like Phoenix Chick and Bloodthirsty Adversary, allow you to utilize a bunch of low-cost spells to deal ramp damage and end the game before your opponent even has a chance to get started. This deck makes up about 8.5% of the meta share and is one of the cheapest decks to build at around $100 average for the full deck, you know, if you're playing it in the lowest rarity. So it's definitely not a bad entry. A couple of my friends who started playing Standard with me at the same time are actually utilizing this in the same way, and it just wins. I mean, the name is funny, but that is kind of what it does. It's a very powerful deck that can just, the haste and the speed, if you can't outpace it, you're essentially, going to end up losing before the game even really gets started. Next up, we've got Azorius Soldiers. This one's another one that is really fun to play, and another one I have fully built in real life. I've been kind of play testing around with some of these in person and then some online. This is a blue-white deck that basically focuses on the soldier tribal elements to beef up your cards with things like Valiant Veteran, and then utilize cards like Resolute Officer and Siege Veteran to put additional damage on board and replenish resources. It makes up about 5% of the meta share, but it's still a tier 1 deck, and while I do find it to be along the lower end of meta decks in Standard that I like so far, it's definitely good, and I think when the rotation does happen, it might even get better because it will not lose much, and we could get more soldiers in the upcoming sets that bolster it even further. Now, rounding it out, we've got Esper Legends, which is white, blue, black, and this one is interesting because it does play a lot of cards that allow you to kind of spam the board, but also play a more control-ish, utilizing things like Adeline Resplendent Cather to create soldier tokens and get buffs, and then cards like Rafine Scheming Seer for drawing with the built-in ward protection, and of course the deck does play Shoulder it as well, so it's got a lot of big things to answer other cards, and you can, build this in different ways, but it's just really powerful, kind of utilizing the things that you have to your typing advantage, and it's really just a combination of powerful cards that allow you to play around a lot of your opponent's stuff. This one's definitely my least favorite to play against, for whatever that's worth, but it makes up about 7% of the meta share and is a tier 1 deck as well. Definitely pretty solid. I don't think it's going to lose too much either when the rotation time comes around, save for a few things, so I do expect this to stay around in some form or fashion unless new cards creep it out. And then finally, we've got Mono Blue Tempo. That's the standard mono blue, basically says you can't play. It's full of negates, and it does not play that many creatures at all, with cards like Haughty Djinn and Tolarian Terror being the only monsters that typically end up in the main board, and then it's very instant heavy to essentially buff up your creatures, negate your opponent's stuff, and push for game. It is definitely a grind to play against and has been kind of annoying at times, but it does suffer a bit in its ability to brick and just not always having the ability to deal with some of the stronger decks. It's also super cheap, though. It's $75 to build the deck in full, so if you're looking to get into Standard or maybe just getting into something new, it's definitely not the worst thing to start with, although I would caution that it's not necessarily the most fun to play unless that's kind of your play style. Moving forward with this video series as we go, I'm going to be talking more about Standard and each of these decks in detail, and kind of showing some gameplay and footage of my actual playing with these decks. It may take a little bit of time before I'm able to finish a couple of them just because of getting the resources, but I do have a few built already, and just want to go into like what I've seen playing each one and what I find its strengths and weaknesses to be. Again, there's probably a lot of people who know this as well. I'm sort of intending this to be more of like an intro, sort of beginner's thing for Standard, much like myself, because it has been quite a while since I've played, but I have to say I'm enjoying it a ton so far, and it does seem to be relatively healthy aside from a few cards, and I'm pretty confident that the rotation might switch that up. Now, Standard may change dramatically soon because with March of the Machine being another set that's going to introduce another 300 plus cards to the card pool, we could see a lot of shifts, a lot of new decks entering the fray, and maybe some getting crept out. But currently, this is what we're working with, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So if you guys enjoy this type of content and want to see more Standard stuff, let me know, because I am going to be working on an ongoing series kind of covering the Standard format and talking about cards and my thoughts on it, whilst still doing the Yu-Gi-Oh videos and covering other things. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like the video if you did enjoy, and leave a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon if you want to stay notified with the latest videos, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.